You're saying don't push peace, but don't say you're pushing peace and then use it as an excuse to just go kick it with the cool kids in the eyes of the fans or whatever.
My brother, you put it in the nicest way I can say it.
Interesting.
You put it in the nicest way I can say it, brother. Just like that.
I just looked at his channel right now. He did the Doody Low one drop yesterday, and then today, 2 hours ago, he did drop.
It seems like Durk can't stay out of trouble. Even if his life depends on it, allegedly, he's been orchestrating some truly wild things straight from behind bars 3 minutes ago. The buzz started flying that Durk's been pulling the strings to deal with OTF Jam's baby mama. Yep, all from his jail cell.
Like, you're searching for love right now, sir. Like, you need someone to love you. Your mama don't love you. You live in that basement, sir. We was on FaceTime, sir. Your bed was in the basement. If it's a bed in the basement, that's your room.
So the U.S. Marshals picked Durk up in Florida on October 24th. Why allegedly a elimination for hire plot targeting none other than Quando Rondo. This arrest has spawned a whole web of theories, suggesting Durk might have had his fingers in even more shady dealings like the deaths of Stephon Mack and Octavia Redmond. Internet sleuths are going wild with this. One social media influencer and YouTuber Poetic Flacco dropped some spicy screenshots. Recently, people are running with the idea that Durk was behind a series of retaliatory eliminations, though to be fair, there's not much official evidence to support those claims yet.
Everybody in Chicago and everybody in the drill world in general has been very, very reckless. And I know a lot of dudes from labels who are like, dudes in their 40s and 50s who sign dudes who basically are fucking killers, like nonstop all the time. And I've always looked at that and thought, this is kind of weird. It's kind of weird that you guys are in a rush to sign these dudes from the Bronx that, to me, it's obvious are like actually sliding.
But let's talk about those supposed connections first. There's Octavia Redmond. She was just doing her job delivering mail in West Pullman, South Chicago, when someone lethally hit her multiple times in broad daylight. The whole thing went down on July 19th, 2024. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She passed away at Advocate Christ Medical Center. The shooter's getaway car was later found burned up. Real smooth surveillance footage even caught the masked suspect hopping into a stolen ride to make his grand escape.
How dare you? And then you could just think you could just get away with it? My members are scared to go to work.
That concern now growing after 48-year-old poster worker Octavia Redmond was gunned down while on the job late Friday morning. Her USPS truck left sitting idle near 122nd in Harvard, where police say someone pulled up and shot her multiple times before driving off. Eventually, they caught a 15-year-old boy in Iowa and charged him with Octavia's elimination. Extradited back to Chicago, his court date is set for November 1st. And let's be clear here, the authorities have not managed to link Redmond's death to Lil Durk or OTF Jam. Despite all the online conspiracy theories floating around, then there's Stephon Mack. He met his tragic end in January 2022, lethally hit and eliminated while leaving the Youth Peace Center in Roseanne. 2 gunmen ambushed him. Classic Chicago-style gang violence, though one security guard at the scene made it out alive. Federal charges were eventually slapped on 2 suspects, Anthony Montgomery Wilson and Preston Powell, nearly 2 years later in December 2023. While Mont Wilson pled not guilty, Powell conveniently disappeared. Still at large, and here's where it all gets spicier. Lil Durk's arrest is all tied up in the elimination for hire case involving El Pab, a supposed act of revenge for King Von's death. Everyone remembers King Vo. He was lethally hit back in November 2020 during a chaotic confrontation involving Quando Rondo's crew. They even had footage of Q's associate Timothy Lil Tim Leaks doing the deed, but thanks to Jorg's stand your ground law, the charges against were eventually dropped. Self-defense, they say.
Sometimes, I apologize. Sometimes shit get gangster, cuz I done fake being a gangster in my life. For real. I done grew up and faking like I'm a gangster, knowing I don't even know nothing about being a gangster. But I'm walking around like I'm this, I'm that, I'm acting like this and that, knowing I ain't know none of that. And I came to a point in my life where I'm like, boy, it's time to be gangster.
You feel like you could talk that shit up? Manifest that shit to us?
Yeah, boy, I done manifest all the bullshit that happened in my life, boy. I believe in the power of the tongue, boy. And if you don't, boy, you a fool, boy.
Even more, both Lil Durk and his late brother D-Thing have had their names linked to numerous violent events over the years, but officially at least nothing stuck. Not yet anyway. The authorities are still trying to put those pieces together. Fast forward to today, in a big twist, Durk's now facing accusations of orchestrating a whole elimin for hire plot targeting Quando Rondo. They say Durk wanted to settle the score for Vo, and he wasn't exactly subtle about it either. Word is, he made it clear in 2020 that he was putting a hit on Quando, and a couple of years later folks made the trip from Chicago to LA to get the job done. And it's not like Durk was exactly low-key about this revenge mission. Either he was throwing shade all over social media and even dropping hints in His music, remember Aha Yeah, not the subtlest diss track. Meanwhile, a bunch of names have surfaced and connect with this plot. We're talking about Cav on London Grant, DeAndre Wilson, Keith Jones, David Lindsay. And Asa Houston, and guess what, they all seem to have ties to OTF or other Chicago gangs. The feds are also looking at a few unnamed co-conspirators, one of whom they're pretty sure is Durk himself. The whole thing sounds like it's straight out of an action movie, tracking key CSUV sneaking around LA. With ski masks and guns, and then boom, a shootout at a Beverly Hills gas station that ended up eliminating Key's cousin, Absolute Ely Braz.
Do this rap, get blamed for a lot of violence, and still be living in the hood, still doing the same shit. I'm saying that's backwards. You do better to change, not change to the same. Okay?
Of course, with something this big, the authorities aren't playing around. The charges are serious, using interstate commerce facilities in the commission of elimination for hire, and if they're found guilty, life in prison, no joke. And let's not forget the fallout from all of this. Back in Chicago, Durk had been getting some love for his community work, even had towns giving him keys to their cities. Well, the moment those indictments came down, those mayors were having second thoughts. Broadview's mayor, for example, pulled back their honorary key pretty much immediately. Even Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson got caught in the crossfire. People wanted to know what he was going to do about Durk's donations to his campaign. His response, well, let's just say he skirted around actually answering whether he'd give the money back. Oh, and speaking of lawsuits, Durk's facing another one on top of everything else. The mother of BG Duck, a rival rapper who was eliminated in 2020, is suing Durk, King Va, and OTF for allegedly putting a $100,000 bounty on Duck's life. FBG Duck was lethally hit 16 times outside a Dolce and Gabbana store in Chicago, and she claims that Durk's crew even used the feud and Duck's death for clout in their songs and music videos. Everywhere she's going after Durk and his entire network, including the record labels. If this goes to trial, it's going to be a circus, and that's just scratching the surface. Let's go deeper into the chaos that seems to surround Lil Durk wherever he goes. Remember that CBS News article Poetic Flacco posted about the two men charged in alleged elimination for hire slaying in Rosen Bitwell. That case is tangled up with Lil Durk's story too. According to some of the latest theories floating around, the whole thing is a chain reaction of retaliation and alliances back in Roseanne Stefan, Massachusetts' elimination left everyone wondering who could have been behind it. For months, rumors circled around whether or not this elimination was just another notch in the belt of the ongoing beef between rival factions. The involvement of OTF in the mix has only deepened the speculation. The way the dots connect is pretty crazy. Stefan Mack wasn't just any bystander. He was allegedly connected to some of the rival crews at odds with Durk's OTF. This whole elimination for hire theme isn't just a one-off incident. Folks close to the streets have hinted that there's a code, a sort of you take one of ours, we take one of yours game at play. And guess what? The prosecutor compers seem to be leaning into that angle pretty hard. They're painting a picture that shows a systematic approach. This isn't just beef, it's organized retaliation. We can't discuss Lil Durk without King Va. The two were practically brothers, and their bond went beyond the music. When Va was eliminated, it wasn't just a tragic loss for Durk, it was a declaration of war. People say that V's death changed Durk. He lost his smile, his hope. That's when he allegedly turned to darker methods, including the infamous bounty on Quando Rondo.
Life ain't shit without females. I was shit without the hoes on the block and shit. So
there'd be nothing to fight over if it wasn't for them. Really.
You wouldn't even, why you getting fly? I wouldn't even be buying this shit. All this shit for girls and shit.
That's a good point. I'm lacking over here.
You see what I'm saying?
That's why I had the same girl.
You
for
got
so
the
long.
tattoos though. I don't think you had tattoos.
That's white boy jewelry for sure. Yeah, I had to get the throat tattoo when I was like 19.
You got to think about it. We do everything for females.
I didn't even know about chains when I was 19. I probably would have got a chain instead of a neck tattoo.
I hope she think this raw. I hope she think this cute. I hope this make I like me.
The feud between Quando Rondo and Durk goes beyond just King Von's death. It's personal, it's emotional, and it's raw. Quando was Von's rival, but the confrontation that night in Atlanta was a boiling point that left King Von dead. The fact that Timothy Lil Tim Leaks walked away under the shield of Jork's stand your ground law didn't sit well with Durk, and it's not hard to imagine why Von wasn't just an artist on Durk's label, he was family. And this bond is exactly what prosecutors are hoping to use against Durk, painting him as a man hellbent on revenge, someone who would stop at nothing to avenge his fallen brother. This all leads us to the elimination for hire involving Lil Pab. According to sources, it was all orchestrated by Durk in retaliation for Von's death. Lil Pab wasn't even the original target, but more like collateral damage, a lethal hit taken in a mission that was supposed to get to Quando Rondo. Instead, it took the life of his cousin, leaving Quando himself shaken but alive. Durk's public behavior after Von's death also didn't help his case. The tracks he released, the posts he made, all of them pointed to revenge, to unfinished business. Authorities are looking at it all as Durk practically leaving breadcrumbs for them to follow. Music is an art, but in Durk's case, the feds argue it's also a confession. It's no secret that law enforcement has been keeping a close eye on Durk for years, but his Connections go deeper than just being a rapper, with the criminal record Durk's late brother D-Thing also played a significant role in all of this. D was a high-ranking member of OTF, and his influence was felt throughout Chicago. Dang's death only further ignited tensions, another loss that demanded vengeance, at least in the eyes of those who believed in the eye for an eye mindset. Durk's legal troubles didn't start with King Von or D-Thing. He's been facing charges on and off for years, everything from gun possession to attempted elimination, and every time he managed to dodge prison, it seemed like there was just another charge waiting for him around the corner. Law enforcement agencies are building a narrative that paints Lil Durk as not just a rapper but the leader of a enterprise, a man whose lyrics are more about instruction manuals than storytelling. Let's talk about the FBI affidavit, the one that talks about OTF being more than a music collective. It's an organized group, a gang that operates with military precision. Durk, referred to by his legal name Banks, is depicted as the man in charge, the mastermind. The FBI claims that OTF has been responsible for numerous acts of violence, all orchestrated to maintain their standing in the streets and eliminate threats to their reputation. It's a classic RICO-style narrative, the kind that has brought down mafia bosses and cartel kingpins. Durk's team, of course, denies all of this. They say OTF is just a label, a group of artists trying to make their way in the music world, but the feds aren't buying it. The affidavit goes into detail about how members of OTF supposedly carried out acts of violence at Durk's direction, including putting bounties on rival gang members, and that's where the connection to Quando Rondo's crew comes in. This isn't just about rap, it's about power, influence, and keeping a grip on the street. Then there's the attempted flight. When Lil Durk tried to flee, it seemed like an admission of guilt to many. Booked flights to Dubai, Switzerland, and even Italy. It reads like the actions of a man who knew his time was up, but according to his lawyers, it wasn't quite that dramatic. They argue that Durk knew he had a warrant and wanted to see if he'd be flagged trying to leave the country, a risky move, but one that's supposedly common in the world of high-stakes legal drama. Durk's arrest in Miami, just before he could board a private jet to Italy, was a spectacle. The feds swooped in, and Durk didn't stand a chance to law enforcement. It was proof of his consciousness of guilt, that he was trying to escape and avoid facing the charges against him. His lawyers argue otherwise, saying it was all a misunderstanding. But come on, who books multiple international flights just to see if they have a warrant? It's a tough sell. The fallout from this arrest has been swift. Durk was once seen as a reformed man, someone who was trying to give back to his community. He had received keys to city. He was celebrated for his contributions, but all of that goodwill evaporated as soon as the allegations surfaced. Mayors distanced themselves, and even those who initially supported Durk began to backtrack. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's response was especially telling when pressed about whether he'd returned the donations Durk had made to his campaign. Johnson dodged the question, offering only vague platitudes about due process and not judging someone before their trial. And just when you thought things couldn't get worse for Durk, there's the lawsuit from FBG Duck's mother. She's not just suing Durk, she's going after the entire infrastructure that supports him. The lawsuit names not only OTF and King Von, but also the record labels that work with Durk, including Sony and Interscope. The accusation that Durk and his team used the death of her son as a marketing tool, but they profited off his elimination by incorporating the feud into their music. FBG Duck's elimination was another high-profile eliminating that rocked Chicago, lethally hit 16 times outside a high-end store. It was the kind of brazen attack that sent shockwaves through the city, and to hear Duck's mother tell it OTF played a role in making it happen. The $100,000 bounty, the disses and songs, the references and music videos, it all added up to a campaign of terror that ultimately cost her son his life. The lawsuit is a bold move, and it's one that could have massive implications for the music industry. If she wins, it could set a precedent that holds artists and labels accountable for the content they produce. It's a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line between artistic expression and incitement? But for now, it's just another battle that Durk has to fight, another headache on top of everything else. So where does all of this leave Lil Durk? He's facing multiple charges, lawsuits, and the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. If convicted, his music, once seen as a reflection of his environment, is now being used against him as evidence of his criminal intent. The feds are building a case that paints Durk as more than just a rapper. He's a leader, a strategist, someone who uses his platform to orchestrate violence and maintain his position of power. The trial, if it happens, could be a landmark case. It's not just about L. Durk, it's about the intersection of music, influence, and crime. It's about whether or not an artist can be held responsible for the actions of their followers, whether lyrics can be seen as literal threats rather than metaphorical expressions, and it's about the role that law enforcement plays in policing not just the streets but also the culture that comes out of those streets. The Chicago-born rapper, a major player in the drill music scene, seems to have as many hits in the courtroom as he does on Spotify. And honestly, that seems to be part of the brand, for better or worse. Let's rewind to where it all started back in 2011. Durk got popped on a weapons charge, not even out of the gate yet, and he's already in cuffs. He served 3 months before being let out on bond, only to finish up an 87-day stint. This was just the beginning, and if we're being honest, it's almost like he was trying to lay down his own criminal backstory, a necessary accessory in the drill scene. Perhaps fast forward to 2013 and Surprise, surprise, Durk gets arrested again for unlawful use of a weapon. By a felon, apparently the police caught him trying to toss a gun into his car as they approached because sure, that'll totally work right. This incident further sealed his reputation, not just as a rapper but as someone neck deep. In Chicago's mix of gang violence and run-ins with the law, drill music and criminal records go together like peanut butter and jelly, and Durk was making sure everyone knew it. Then there was the whole 2019 fiasco in Atlanta, which really turned up the heat. Durk turned himself in over shooting that. Happened outside the Varsity, a well-known restaurant in Atlanta. The story goes like this. Some guy named Alexander Witherspoon ended up lethally hit and robbed of $30,000. A chain and his car. Durk, along with fellow rapper King Vo, got slapped with attempted elimination and aggravated assault charges among others. The prosecution even had surveillance footage that they said showed Durk firing a gun from a car. Durk's team tried to poke holes in the evidence, but apparently it wasn't enough because the judge found enough probable cause to keep the charges rolling. The timing couldn't have been worse. Durk was riding high in his career, and now he was facing the very real possibility of spending a chunk of it behind bars. But in 2022, the legal gods smiled on him, and the charges were dropped. The Efton County DA decided it wasn't worth prosecuting even though there was enough to arrest him initially. It's like they just decided they had better things to do. Either way, for Durk it was a huge relief time to focus on rapping instead of avoiding a prison sentence. And then there's the story that just keeps getting messier, the elimination of rival Chicago rapper FBG Duck, aka Carlton. Weekly in August 2020, FBG Duck was gunned down in broad daylight in Chicago's Gold Coast, a part of town where people aren't exactly used to ducking bullets. This wasn't just another headline about Chicago violence, it was an escalation of a feud between Duck's crew Tuil and Block, the latter being linked to Durk's label Only the Family. For years this beef played out in diss tracks and real-world violence, but the stakes got higher when FBG Duck's mother Lashina Weekly filed a wrongful death lawsuit in 2023. She went after Lil Durk, King Von's estate, and their label, claiming they'd monetize the violence that got her son eliminated. According to her, songs like King Von's Took Her to the O were all part of a calculated effort to profit off this bloody rivalry. The lawsuit didn't stop at Durk and Vo, it also took aim at major record labels like Sony, arguing they were complicit in all this mess. After all, they're the ones backing these artists, promoting these tracks, and making a buck off of real life tragedies. It's a big question. How much responsibility do these corporations hold when they're raking in millions off of street violence glorified through music? And honestly, it's hard not to see their point. When you look at the cycle of beefs, diss tracks, and actual deaths, it's like a feedback loop, where the violence in the music fuels the violence in the streets, which then gets turned into more music. FBG Duck's mom seems to think so too, accusing Durk and his label of using her son's death as a tool for profit. And if she's right, it's not just Durk who's at fault, but the entire system propping him up, from record labels to streaming platforms. But there's another side to this. Supporters of drill artists like Durk argue that their music is just a reflection of their reality, a way to give voice to what they've lived through. They see the crackdown on these rappers as another form of systemic racism, an attempt to silence black voices that are simply speaking their truth to them. Durk's legal troubles are just another example of how the system tries to shut down anyone who doesn't fit the mold of what's acceptable. Art. A huge question hanging over all of this is whether an artist should be held responsible for the actions of their listeners or for real-world violence connected to their lyrics. The lawsuit by FBG Duck's mom might be the test case that decides that could it set a precedent for holding rappers accountable for what they say in their songs. If the suit goes through, it's not just Durk who will feel the heat. This could change the whole music industry, especially when it comes to backing artists who flirt with the line between storytelling and outright instigation. It raises uncomfortable questions about where free speech ends and where responsibility begins, questions that the music industry might not be ready to answer but can't ignore forever. And let's not forget the record labels in all this. They're the ones making the real money while the artists are left to deal with the fallout, be it legal troubles, street retaliation, or worse. The lawsuit doesn't just call out Durk, it points fingers at Sony and others, suggesting that these companies have been happy to turn a blind eye as long as the cash keeps flowing. If they get dragged into this and held accountable, we could be looking at a major shift in how labels handle artists with controversial and dangerous backgrounds. Lil Durk, depending on who you ask, he's either a raw, talented artist who clawed his way to the top against all odds, or the poster boy for everything wrong with drill music. His entire career has been this tight RPP walk, balancing between mainstream success and the kind of street life that's always trying to pull him back down. That's what makes Durk such an interesting figure. He's constantly one misstep away from the headlines, making music that's real enough to be dangerous, sometimes too real. Durk's story makes us deal with some uncomfortable truths, like what happens when art imitates life a little too closely. The violence, the rivalries, the lawsuits, they're not side stories, they're the main plot. And as long as the streams keep coming in, as long as the fans are still hooked, Durk's going to keep walking that line between being a rap star and being the next cautionary tale. It's almost like we're just watching waiting to see if he makes it out or becomes another statistic. It's tempting to see Durk as just another guy trying to shake off a rough past. But those legal issues, they're not just drama, they've had very real effects on his career every time he got dragged into court. It wasn't just about the judge or the charges, it was also about the court of public opinion. In the rap game, your reputation is everything. Those legal fights didn't just shape Durk's life, they shaped how the entire industry saw him. For a while, it felt like the arrests were almost more central to his story than the music was. When he caught that weapons charge back in 2011, just as he was trying to make a name for himself, the narrative shifted. Instead of just being about the music, it was about survival. And yeah, in the drill scene, survival sells the street cred is part of the package. Durk's fans loved him, not just for his sound, but for the rawness behind it, the struggles, the missteps, it all added up to the authenticity. That's a big deal in that world. But the downside, for a long time, it felt like his music was chained to his legal troubles. His 2013 arrest for unlawful use of a weapon by a felon just reinforced the image. Durk, the guy who couldn't shake his past, it didn't matter that he was talented. People couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever managed to stay out of trouble long enough to hit his stride. The constant legal drama definitely had an impact. Sure, Durk kept dropping tracks, but there was always this cloud hanging over everything he did. How do you fully get behind an artist when there's a very real chance they could vanish into the system at any moment? His fans stuck by him, but it's hard not to feel like they were always bracing for bad news. When the charges finally got dropped in 2022, it felt like a fresh start, like maybe Durk could finally focus on what really mattered, the music, and who knows, maybe now he can leave all that other stuff behind for real this time. Considering all of Durk's legal battles and accusations, do you think his music is just artistic expression, or should he be held accountable for the violent themes? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.